The day I surprised my wife with a custom pink Porsche 911 was supposed to be the happiest moment of our 10-year marriage. I'd spent 3 long years saving every extra dollar, secretly working with a specialty shop to recreate the exact ballet slipper pink shade she'd dreamed about since med school. When she stepped into the driveway and saw it, her dream car shimmering under the Georgia sun, she burst into tears of pure joy. And for a moment everything felt perfect. But peace in an HOA neighborhood never lasts. Exactly 8 days later, a spoiled HOA Karen and her tantrum-prone daughter marched up my driveway, pointed at my wife's car, and screamed, "I want it for free." I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. It was the spark that lit a months-long war of entitlement, racism, and corruption so insane that even the police and a judge got dragged into it. Before we dive in, comment your city and local time below, and don't forget to subscribe for more HOA nightmare stories just like this. The morning after that chaotic encounter, I honestly hoped the whole thing had just been some bizarre misunderstanding, maybe a bad day, maybe too much entitlement and caffeine mixed together. But life in our neighborhood had always been calm before all this. My wife Amara and I had worked too hard, climbed too far from where we started to let a ridiculous HOA princess and her power-hungry mother ruin our peace. So, let me take you back a little before the screaming, before the threats, before the pink Porsche became a neighborhood headline to when everything was still simple. My name is Darius Palmer. I grew up in a tiny apartment above my mom's old sewing shop. She used to say, "Hard work doesn't promise success, but laziness guarantees failure," and for better or worse, that stuck with me. I studied computer science, built a tiny consulting business out of my college dorm room, and spent the next decade grinding through 80-hour weeks until it finally grew into something stable. My wife, though, she's the real powerhouse. Amara worked her way through med school, survived residency, and became one of the best pediatric surgeons in Atlanta. We were not born into privilege. We climbed. So when we bought our home in Oak Ridge, a quiet, upper-middle-class suburb just outside Atlanta, it felt like a milestone. Not a brag, not a trophy, just something we earned. 5 years of peace, good neighbors, backyard barbecues, and quiet Sunday mornings, sipping coffee on the porch. Then came the Porsche. Amara had always loved one specific car. Not just any Porsche 911, but that exact custom shade she once saw in a magazine ballet slipper pink. The way her eyes lit up when she talked about it. Man, you don't forget that kind of look. But we were paying off loans, setting up retirement savings, doing everything responsibly, so she always ended with, "Maybe one day." She had no idea one day was already in motion. I spent 3 years secretly putting aside money from every contract, every bonus. I talked to a custom paint shop in California, coordinated with a dealership, and signed more paperwork than I did when we bought the house. But when that car finally rolled up our driveway on a flatbed truck wrapped with a giant bow, worth every penny. Amara came home exhausted from a night shift, hair tied back, scrubs, wrinkled, looking like she'd just saved half the city. She got out of her car, looked at the Porsche, and blinked like she thought she was hallucinating. When she realized what it was, she covered her mouth with both hands and started crying. Happy tears, the kind you remember forever. Our neighbors clapped from across the street. The Johnsons even came out cheering. Someone yelled, "You two deserve it," and for a week, things were perfect. Until the Harringtons. They lived in the colonial-style mansion at the end of the street, a home so unnecessarily big it looked like it was compensating for something. I'd only seen the husband Gregory twice, always in a suit, always on the phone, always too important to wave back. His wife Trish was a self-appointed HOA royalty member who attacked every neighborhood event like she was auditioning for Real Housewives. And Brittany, well, if entitlement had a face, it would be hers. 18 years old, permanently glued to a phone, wearing pink head to toe like she invented the color. We'd exchanged pleasantries a few times, but something always felt off. Trish had this habit of saying, "Oak Ridge is changing so much," while glancing at us like we were the change she didn't approve of. Nothing direct. Nothing you could call out. But enough. Still, we ignored it, until the day they saw the Porsche. The morning after Amara first took it to work, I noticed the Harringtons staring from their yard. Not admiringly, more like they had just discovered a crime scene. They whispered fiercely, Brittany stomping her foot like a toddler, denied a lollipop. I should have known something was coming. A few days later, we were washing the car in the driveway, Amara wiping down the mirrors while I cleaned the wheels, when I heard a loud gasp. Not a normal gasp. A dramatic, theatrical gasp like someone had caught us stealing the moon. We turned, and there they were, Trish in a hot pink blazer, Brittany in a matching dress. both marching toward us with synchronized indignation. "Oh no," Amara muttered under her breath. "Trish didn't even say hello. She pointed at the car like she was pointing at a dead body." "Is that it?" she demanded. The Porsche. I blinked. Yes," Brittany practically shoved her mother aside. "That's my color." Amara exchanged a look with me, the kind of look that says, "I'm too tired for this." I tried to remain polite. "Is there something you need?" Brittany jabbed a finger at the car. "I've been telling everyone for months that I'm getting a pink Porsche. Dad promised you. Stole my idea." Amara coughed out a laugh she couldn't suppress. "We didn't steal. You need to give it to me," Brittany snapped. "Today." I stared at her. Surely she was joking. No one could be this delusional. Trish crossed her arms dramatically. "We're willing to take it off your hands. Without payment." My jaw dropped. "Without payment?" Brittany tossed her hair. "Yeah, for free. I want it for free." That was the first time she screamed those words. Definitely not the last. I couldn't even form a sentence. Amara choked on her water bottle. It was absurd, so absurd that for a moment I wondered if this was some kind of prank show. But Trish wasn't smiling. She stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was about to accuse us of treason. "Be reasonable. Your people shouldn't be driving a car like this anyway." And there it was, the first real jab. I felt heat rising in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "The car belongs to my wife. It's not for sale. Not at any price." Brittany stomped her foot. "Mom, make them give it to me. My daughter deserves it," Trish hissed. "You should think about your place in this neighborhood. That one stung. Not because it hurt, but because it came from a place I'd fought my whole life to escape." I took out my phone and pressed record. Trish's eyes widened. "What are you doing documenting?" I said calmly. "Just in case." Brittany's face twisted with outrage. She opened her mouth and hurled a word I hadn't heard directed at me since high school. A racial slur, sharp and venomous. Loud enough for neighbors to hear, loud enough to sting for the rest of the day. Amara stepped forward, voice trembling with anger. "Get off our property. Now." Trish grabbed her daughter's arm. "We'll be back," she snapped, "and that car will be ours." They stormed off, pink clothes swaying like angry flamingos. I turned to Amara. She sighed and leaned against the Porsche. "This neighborhood is about to get real messy, isn't it?" I nodded. "Yeah, and I don't think they're done." The truth was, the Harringtons were just getting started. The next 48 hours felt strange. The kind of strange where you know the storm hasn't hit yet, but you can feel the pressure drop in the air. Amara and I tried to move on. She focused on her patients. I focused on my work, but there was this lingering awareness that the Harringtons weren't done. You could sense it in the way they glared from across the cul-de-sac, the way Brittany kept slowing down each time she drove past our driveway just to stare at the Porsche like she was keeping tabs on it. Like she believed she had a legal right to it simply because she wanted it. On Wednesday morning, the first sign of escalation came through my wife. I was sipping coffee in my home office when my phone rang. Amara's voice came through tight, clipped, controlled in that way she used when she was trying not to explode. "Darius," she said, "you're not going to believe what I found on my car." Even before she sent the photo, I already knew it was something ugly. And it was. A note written in blocky black marker. "This car doesn't belong to you. Sell it to its rightful owner or face consequences." I felt the anger hit me like a wave. "Was anyone around?" "No," she said. "It was on the windshield when I went out after surgery." "We'll save the note. Document everything I told her. This could get ugly." "I know." She exhaled shakily. "I just can't believe people like this still exist." I could. I'd met plenty of them. But the point wasn't to argue. It was to protect my wife. I told her I'd start putting together a file, dates times recordings, everything. At that point, I still hoped it would all blow over. Maybe I thought this was just a final tantrum. I had no idea how far they were willing to go. That Friday, as I pulled into our driveway after a client meeting, I noticed a sleek black Mercedes parked in front of our home. At first, I wasn't worried. Then the driver stepped out. Gregory Harrington. The man himself. He approached with the smile of someone who'd practiced charm in the mirror. He extended a hand. "Mr. Palmer," he said, "I believe you've met my wife and daughter." The word "met" was doing a lot of heavy lifting there. I didn't shake his hand. "Unfortunately," I replied. If he was offended, he didn't show it. Instead, he adopted this polished professional tone, like he was trying to negotiate a business deal. "I came to speak with you man to man about the situation regarding the Porsche." "There is no situation," I said. "Your family has been harassing mine. The car belongs to my wife. That's the beginning and end of it." He chuckled softly as though I were being irrational. "My daughter has her heart set on that exact model and color. I promised it to her months ago, but our order was delayed. Between us, he leaned in, slightly lowering his voice. She's been unbearable since your wife brought that car home. Not my problem, I replied. And I'm sure it doesn't excuse any emotional overreactions from my wife or daughter. They can be dramatic. They could also be discriminatory and threatening, but sure, dramatic. I want to make you an offer. He straightened his tie. I'm prepared to pay you 20% above what you paid for the vehicle. I stared at him. You want me to sell my wife's anniversary gift? To your daughter. He nodded. Everyone wins. You make a profit. My daughter gets her dream car, except my wife who loses her gift. You could simply buy her another one, he said, waving a hand. There are plenty of cars out there, but she doesn't want a car. She wants that one, and it's not for sale. His polished expression tightened just barely. Mr. Palmer, surely you understand that sometimes people in our community must be flexible. There it was, the thinly veiled threat. I kept my tone calm. No. He inhaled slowly, then spoke in a softer voice. Let me be direct. I have connections, deep ones. If you choose to be stubborn about this, things could become very difficult for you and your wife. I watched him carefully. Are you threatening me? Of course not, he said with faux innocence. Just pointing out reality. For example, the hospital your wife works at, we're major donors. I sit on committees in this county that review contracts. I know the chief of police well. The implication hung in the air like a noose. And it would be a shame, he continued, if your consulting business suddenly lost certain opportunities, or if your wife's performance came under additional scrutiny. I clenched my jaw. That sounds a lot like blackmail. His smile faded completely. I'm simply giving you a chance to avoid trouble, and I'm telling you the answer is no. His eyes narrowed slightly, but instead of escalating, he forced a smile back onto his face. Think it over. I'm confident you'll come to a more reasonable conclusion after discussing it with your wife. He turned and walked back to his Mercedes. The moment he got inside, his fake smile dropped completely. I stood there for a long moment afterward, breathing hard. When Amara came home that evening, we sat down at the table and went over everything, the note, the confrontation, Gregory's threat. We need a lawyer, she said immediately. I agree, and we need to document every single thing from now on. I already started, I told her, lifting my notebook. Then she opened a folder she'd brought from the hospital. I've been keeping logs too. Of everything. Even before today. She had already thought ahead. That calmed me more than anything. We went to bed that night, hoping, praying that we'd seen the worst of the Harringtons. We hadn't. Monday morning at 7:30 a.m. sharp, the chaos exploded into something far beyond anything I imagined. Amara had taken a shower after a long night shift and walked outside with her travel mug of coffee, ready to head in for a later surgery. 30 seconds later, she burst back into the house, voice shaking. Darius, you need to come outside. Now. I sprinted out the door barefoot and froze. Her Porsche, her beautiful, flawless custom Porsche, was sitting on 4 flat tires, not deflated, slashed, deep, jagged cuts on each one, and across the driver's side door, smeared in thick lipstick, were the words, "Pink is Brittany's color." I felt something inside me break. That's it, I said. I'm calling the police. Amara stood beside me, fists trembling. I can't believe this. I can't believe someone would. But she could, and so could I. When the police arrived, they examined the damage until I told them who we suspected. The moment the name Harrington came out of my mouth, their energy shifted. Shoulders slumped, tone softened. One officer said, "Could be neighborhood kids." Another shrugged, saying they'd look into it but didn't seem particularly motivated. They took notes, slow notes, then left. Amara stared at the pavement long after the car was gone on a tow truck. "I can't even take it to work today," she murmured. "We'll handle it," I promised, even though I wasn't sure how. The next 72 hours were a blur of insurance calls, delayed appointments, and increasing dread. The body shop postponed twice. My biggest client suddenly went in another direction. Amara received notice of an anonymous complaint at work. Gregory's threats weren't empty. He was pulling strings. Hard. It was no longer about a car. It was about power, control, punishment. And the Harringtons had declared war. The worst part of that week wasn't even the tire slashing or the lipstick message. It was the feeling that Amara and I were fighting a shadow, something invisible, something connected. Every day brought a new inconvenience, a new setback, a new coincidence that made it unbelievably clear the Harringtons were pulling strings we didn't even know existed. By Thursday morning, the Porsche was still sitting at the body shop untouched. Every time I called, the receptionist gave me the same nervous script. "Sorry, sir, something urgent came up. Your appointment has been rescheduled." 3 times. 3 separate excuses. 3 days of delay. Meanwhile, Amara had to borrow a colleague's spare car to make it into the hospital. But the real punch in the gut came that afternoon when my biggest local client, the one whose contract helped keep my business afloat, called me with a rehearsed apology. "We're very sorry, Darius. But the board voted to pause all consulting contracts, including yours." "Pause," I pressed. A long silence, then a sigh. "Look, someone on our board had concerns. The decision is out of my hands." I didn't have to ask who that someone was. Not after Gregory bragged about how many committees he chaired in the county. I hung up feeling sick. When Amara came home that evening, she was silent. Too silent. She dropped her bag on the couch, sank into the cushions, and covered her face with both hands. "What happened?" I asked gently. She didn't answer at first. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "I got called into the department head's office." My stomach tightened. There was an anonymous complaint about my professionalism. About my conduct. About whether I was a good cultural fit for the hospital. A cold anger surged through me. "No, absolutely not. They're trying to smear you now." She shook her head. "My boss doesn't believe a word of it. But the point isn't whether it's true. It's that someone is trying to damage my reputation. Someone named Harrington." Whatever line existed between petty neighborhood drama and full-blown harassment had been crossed, burned, and left smoldering. I sat beside her, took her hands, and said the same thing we'd been repeating ever since this started. We document everything, and we fight back. But even that felt too calm, too measured for what came next. Because Monday morning everything exploded. It was around 9:15 a.m. Amara had worked a brutal 36-hour shift and was finally getting a few hours of sleep upstairs while I answered emails in my office. Then I heard a heavy diesel engine rumbling down our driveway. A tow truck. I frowned, stood up, and went outside. 2 uniformed men, one stocky, one thin and wiry, were walking toward our garage. They looked official enough, holding clipboards, dressed in navy blue jumpsuits with matching patches. "Morning, sir," the stocky one said, handing me a clipboard. "We're here to seize the vehicle." My heart dropped. "What vehicle?" "The pink Porsche 911, he replied without hesitation. "Court orders." For a second, I truly thought I misheard him. "Court orders. What court order?" He pointed to the top of the form. "Signed by Judge Whitfield. Says the vehicle is disputed property in a civil filing, Harrington versus Palmer." "What? We've never been served with anything. We've never even been notified about a court hearing." The tow truck guy shrugged. "This is an ex parte order. Means only one side is present. Don't shoot the messenger, we just follow instructions." I scanned the document. It looked official. Stamped, signed, filed. My hands began to shake, not with fear, but with sheer disbelief. I heard footsteps behind me. Amara, still in her robe, hair messy from sleep, eyes widening in horror as she approached us. "What is going on?" she demanded. I handed her the paper. She read it once, then again. Then she looked up, trembling with fury. "No," she said firmly. "Absolutely not. There is no lawsuit. There is no dispute. This is our car." The tow truck guy shifted uneasily. "Ma'am, look, this is a signed court order. If we disobey it, the judge can charge us with contempt. You can also be charged," Amara snapped, "for participating in an unlawful seizure." That gave them pause. I called Raymond, our lawyer. He picked up after 2 rings. "Raymond, the police may not care about what's going on, but someone just showed up with a court order to seize our car." What he barked. "Email me everything. Do not let them take the vehicle." Amara repeated his instructions out loud. The tow truck operators exchanged nervous glances. "This is not a normal court order," Raymond said over speaker. "No notice, no hearing, no due process. Something is wrong." Before the tow operators could react, the Harringtons arrived. A black SUV screeched to a stop behind the tow truck. Out stepped Trish in a hot pink blazer, and Brittany bouncing like she'd just won a prize on a game show. "Is there a problem?" Trish asked sweetly, though her smile was sharp as a knife. "Oh my God, Mom, look," Brittany squealed. "They're actually taking it." Finally, Amara's face darkened. "What kind of stunt are you pulling, Trish?" "It's not a stunt," Trish said, waving a folder. The judge reviewed the evidence and agreed the car was promised to Brittany first. "You stole our idea." "There is no evidence," I snapped, "because your claim is a lie." Trish shrugged. the judge thought otherwise. And there it was, the name on the document. Judge Whitfield. The same judge Gregory bragged about golfing with. The more this unfolded, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't just harassment. This was corruption. Weaponized privilege. The tow operator finally said, "Look, folks, if you have an issue, take it up with the court. We have a legal order. We should call the police," the thin operator muttered. "Fantastic idea," Trish said smugly. "Chief Williams is a personal friend." I could feel the blood boiling in my veins. At that moment, Raymond pulled into our driveway. He stepped out, suit jacket swinging tie, slightly crooked like he'd sprinted to his car the moment he heard the news. He took the paperwork, scanned it, then looked up furious. "This is highly irregular," he said. "Beyond irregular. This is misconduct." "Still enforceable," Trish sang until someone overturns it. "So go ahead, fight it." "But the car comes with us today." Amara stepped in front of the tow truck. "I am a pediatric surgeon who saves children every day. I've worked my entire life for that car. And let me make one thing clear." Her voice sharpened like a blade. "You are not going to intimidate us. You picked the wrong family." Even the tow truck guys looked startled by her presence. But Raymond placed a hand on her shoulder. "We can't stop them," he said quietly. "Not today. But trust me, this gives us everything we need to bury them legally." We watched helpless as the Porsche, still with fresh paint repairs scheduled, was hooked, lifted, and taken away. Brittany recorded the whole thing on her phone like she was documenting a royal coronation. "I can't wait to drive it," she chirped. Raymond turned to her. "You won't." Her smile vanished. "This is an impound order," he explained coldly. "No one can touch it, not even you, until this case reaches a full hearing." Brittany's face crumpled. "Mom." "You said quiet," Trish snapped, but the damage was done. As the tow truck disappeared down the street, taking Amara's dream car with it, the Harringtons strutted back to their SUV like they'd won a battle. But they had no idea. They had just started a war. Raymond didn't say a word until the Harringtons' SUV turned the corner and vanished. He stood there, hands on his hips, staring down the street like he was trying to burn a hole through the asphalt. Amara stood beside me, fists clenched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. I'd never seen her look so furious, not even during the residency years when she once threatened to strangle a surgical intern for dropping a sterile instrument. When Raymond finally spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that tells you a storm is forming. "They've overplayed their hand," he said quietly. "This is sloppy, reckless, amateur hour." I blinked. Amateur, it had felt like anything but. He lifted the court order again, shaking his head. "They left fingerprints all over this. And now we have something solid to fight." Amara took a deep breath, still visibly shaking. "Raymond, they took my car. And I promise you we're going to get it back," he said. "And then some." He ushered us back inside, already pulling out his laptop and legal pad. "We start now." For the next 3 hours, our dining table transformed into a crime investigation board, papers spread everywhere, documents scanned, evidence bagged. Raymond moved like a man possessed. It was the first time I'd ever seen him truly angry, and honestly, it scared me more than Gregory's threats. "This order isn't just irregular," he muttered as he typed. "It's improper. There was no service of process, no notice, no motion hearing, no basis for emergency seizure of property. And Whitfield signed it knowing that. So he's helping them," I said. "Actively," Raymond replied. "And stupidly. Because he held up the order. This is the kind of shortcut corrupt people take when they think no one's watching." He leaned back, exhaled sharply, and then tapped his pen against the table. "We need evidence of their connections. Something proving collusion between Whitfield and the Harringtons." Amara frowned. "Do we have any?" "Not yet," Raymond said, "but we will." That was the moment we realized this wasn't just about a pink Porsche. It was about unraveling something much bigger, a network of privilege that had been operating unchecked for years, and we were about to pull the thread. The next morning, Raymond returned with a woman who moved with the calm confidence of someone you definitely didn't want to mess with. Tall, sharp eyes, hair pulled into a tight bun, dressed in a black blazer. "This," Raymond said, "is Sofia Rodriguez, former law enforcement. Now, a private investigator." She shook our hands firmly. "I've worked on political corruption cases, corporate fraud, and judicial misconduct. Raymond believes your situation may involve all three." "All that over a car?" I asked. She gave me a look. People who abuse power rarely stop at one thing. They get sloppy when they think they're untouchable. Sophia immediately got to work. Within an hour, she had summarized her plan. Step 1, background checks on the Harringtons. Step 2, Map Gregory's connections in the county judges, police hospital administrators. Step 3. Subpoena call preparation for when we get a new judge. Step 4. Digital evidence from the HOA board and local committees. She looked up. You'd be surprised how many people brag in emails. Then she cracked her knuckles. We start today. While Sophia dug into the Harrington social network, Amara and I focused on collecting our own evidence. We printed every email exchanged with the Porsche dealership, proving that we placed our custom order months before the Harringtons even knew about the color. Amara produced a detailed log of each harassment incident, dates, times, conversations. I downloaded all our security camera footage, including the initial confrontation where Brittany had nearly hurled a slur before Trish stopped her. By that evening, the file we'd created was already thicker than a hospital patient chart. And the next morning, the first breakthrough arrived. Sophia knocked on our door at 8:00 a.m. sharp, holding a slim manila folder with a single satisfied smirk that told me something big was inside. You're going to want to see this. She spread photographs across the table, Gregory and Judge Whitfield together at upscale restaurants, charity, galas, and country club events. Then a picture of their families on a lake trip. But the final photo stole my breath. A selfie posted publicly months earlier of Gregory's daughter Brittany grinning in a boat with the caption, "Annual Lake Weekend with Daddy Judge Whitfield and the whole crew." My mouth fell open. The casualness of it, the ease, the arrogance. "They're that close," Amara whispered. Sophia nodded. "Close enough that this should have been declared as a conflict of interest. Instead, it looks like they exploited it. But the biggest shock was next." Sophia placed a printed screenshot on the table. An email. From Caldwell and Associates, the Harringtons' attorney, to Judge Whitfield's subject. Regarding expedited seizure request. The body of the email read, "Attached is the drafted order. Please sign and return. Client needs this done immediately. Vehicle is high-value asset and risk of removal is significant." Sent 3 days before the seizure order was officially filed in the county's system. Raymond let out a low whistle. Illegal ex parte communications. Collusion. Misconduct. This is big. Sophia nodded. They thought no one would ever see this. I felt adrenaline surge through me. "Can we use it?" Oh, Raymond said. "We are absolutely using it." But the universe wasn't done giving us ammunition. 2 days later, Amara received a text from her colleague Dr. Patel asking to meet privately. We agreed to coffee away from the hospital. When he arrived, he looked nervous, glancing around the cafe twice before sitting down. "I can't give you anything that's considered privileged," he said carefully, "but my wife works as a legal assistant at the firm representing the Harringtons." Amara and I exchanged stunned looks. He continued in a hushed tone. "She's been extremely uncomfortable. She told me the case feels wrong. Like, very wrong. She didn't go into detail, but she said there were internal documents showing the Harringtons didn't inquire about any pink Porsche until after seeing Amara drive hers." Raymond leaned forward. "Does she have access to those documents?" Dr. Patel hesitated. "She won't break confidentiality. She won't hand them to you directly. But she might file a complaint with the State Bar Association." That was code. Sophia smiled. A whistleblower. For the first time since the Porsche was taken, I felt hope. A spark. A shift. They had come after us with lies, intimidation, influence. But greed makes people sloppy, and entitlement makes people careless, and both together, deadliest combination of all. Over the next 3 days, our case exploded open like a dam breaking. Sophia uncovered that the Harringtons had only contacted the Porsche dealership after Amara began driving hers. Neighbors anonymously submitted statements about hearing Trish make comments like, "People like them shouldn't have flashy cars." And the HOA secretary forwarded an old email where Trish complained about maintaining the neighborhood's traditional demographic. Amara read that one twice, jaw clenching. But the final grenade landed Saturday night. Raymond received an encrypted email from Dr. Patel's wife. Inside metadata logs, timestamps, draft versions, screenshots. All confirming that the Harringtons' so-called original Porsche order had been fabricated, backdated in their attorney's system. They'd committed fraud. Real, tangible, provable fraud. Raymond called us immediately. "We've got them," he said, almost breathless. "The whole thing is collapsing," Sophia added. "They never expected someone to push back. They've gotten away with this for years." I felt a strange mix of relief and rage. "So what happens now?" Raymond grinned. The kind of grin you only see on a lawyer who knows victory is coming. We file an emergency motion with a new judge. And then he looked up. We take back your car, and we take down the Harringtons. When Monday finally arrived, the day of our emergency hearing, it felt like the culmination of every sleepless night, every insult, every threat, every act of vandalism, every humiliation we'd endured over the past month. Amara and I stood outside the Fulton County Courthouse in formal clothes, carrying a stack of evidence thick enough to be classified as a murder weapon. Raymond joined us at the front steps, adjusting his tie and giving us a reassuring nod. "This is it," he said. "Judge Ramirez doesn't tolerate nonsense. If the Harringtons think they can charm or intimidate their way through this one, they're about to get a reality check." Amara exhaled slowly. "I'm ready." I squeezed her hand. "We've been ready." When we walked into the courtroom, it was nearly empty, just a few clerks, 2 deputies, and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. Then, 10 minutes before the hearing, the doors swung open, and in marched the entire Harrington circus. Gregory looked pale, stiff, like a man who'd spent all night arguing with his attorney. Trish was dressed in a blindingly bright pink blazer, clearly trying to make some absurd symbolic point, while Brittany strutted in like she was entering her Sweet 16 party, wearing a pink ribbon in her hair and snapping gum with exaggerated confidence. Their attorney Caldwell followed behind them, flipping through a legal pad with the frantic energy of someone who knew he was walking into a losing battle. Brittany made eye contact with us and smirked like she'd already won. But beneath her sugary confidence was something else: panic. She kept adjusting her hair, fidgeting with her bracelet, glancing nervously at her father. Maybe she sensed what was coming. Raymond leaned toward me and whispered, "Watch Gregory, he's cracking." I did. He was sweating. His eyes darted around like he expected the walls to fall in. Then the bailiff stood and called, "All rise." Judge Elena Ramirez entered, mid-50s, steel-gray hair, pulled tightly back glasses, perched low on her nose, and a gaze sharp enough to cut through concrete. She sat, adjusted her robe, and scanned the documents in front of her. Without looking up, she said, "We're here on an emergency motion to vacate a seizure order issued by Judge Whitfield. Before we begin," she lifted the papers, frowned, and finally looked directly at Caldwell. "I have several concerns." Caldwell cleared his throat, already sweating. "Your Honor, I'd be happy to address." "First," she interrupted, "why were the respondents," she gestured toward us, "not notified of the ex parte hearing?" Caldwell fumbled with his pen. "We had reason to believe the property might be removed from the jurisdiction if notice was given." Judge Ramirez raised an eyebrow. A deadly eyebrow. "Based on what evidence?" Caldwell stammered. The pattern of behavior, what pattern?" she pressed. "Your filings contain zero documentation of any such behavior." You could feel the room shift. Trish stiffened. Brittany stopped chewing her gum. Raymond stood. "Your Honor, if I may." Judge Ramirez nodded. Raymond walked to the front with a calm confidence I'd never seen before. "We have evidence that directly contradicts the Harringtons' claims. Evidence showing the order was improperly obtained through misrepresentation and undisclosed conflicts of interest." He handed the judge a folder. She opened it and froze. The courtroom became so silent I could hear my own heartbeat. Inside the folder were the emails, the ones Sophia and the whistleblower had uncovered, showing Caldwell and Judge Whitfield discussing the seizure order days before the case was filed, attaching draft versions back and forth. Judge Ramirez's jaw tightened. Her nostrils flared. She closed the folder slowly, deliberately. Then she looked up at Caldwell with ice in her eyes. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, voice dangerously calm, "would you care to explain why you were communicating with a sitting judge about this case before it was even entered into the official docket?" Caldwell swallowed hard. "Your Honor, I can," but before he could finish, Brittany blurted out loudly, "I just want my pink Porsche back." Daddy promised silence. Judge Ramirez didn't raise her voice, but the command was so sharp Brittany froze mid-sentence. "This is not a children's boutique. This is a court of law." Brittany's mouth snapped shut like someone had stapled it closed. Judge Ramirez continued grilling Caldwell. "Do you have any evidence, any at all, that your clients ordered a Porsche before the Palmers?" Gregory shook his head slightly, eyes wide, silently begging Caldwell not to answer. But the judge wasn't done. She turned to Trish. "Mrs. Harrington, you claim this vehicle was intended for your daughter prior to the Palmers' purchase. Do you have a deposit receipt, emails with the dealership, a bill of sale?" Trish sputtered. "Well, no. But we told everyone. Public gossip is not evidence," the judge snapped. Raymond stepped forward again. "Your Honor, We also have sworn statements from multiple neighbors documenting harassment, intimidation, and racial remarks made by Mrs. Harrington and her daughter toward my clients. He handed another folder to the bailiff. Inside were the written statements from Mrs. Chen, from the Johnsons, from other neighbors who had heard the comments. The judge flipped through them slowly, her face darkening with each page. Then Raymond delivered the killing blow. We also have proof, he said, including dealership documentation and metadata logs, that the Harringtons did not inquire about any Porsche until after Dr. Seventree. Palmer began driving hers. Caldwell visibly sank, and Gregory's face turned ashen. Judge Ramirez looked from the documents to the Harringtons and spoke with a cold, final authority. This court finds that the seizure order issued by Judge Whitfield was obtained improperly, without due process, and in violation of judicial ethics. She banged her gavel once loud, sharp, decisive. The order is vacated immediately. The vehicle is to be returned to Dr. and Mr. Palmer no later than 5:00 p.m. today. Amara squeezed my hand so tightly I felt my fingers go numb. But the judge wasn't finished. She looked directly at the Harringtons. Furthermore, due to credible allegations of harassment, intimidation, and discriminatory behavior, I am issuing a temporary restraining order. The Harrington family is prohibited from approaching the Palmers, their home, their place of work, or any property belonging to them. Trish shot to her feet. You can't do that. Do you know who my husband is? Yes, Judge Ramirez said, and I don't care. The courtroom erupted in quiet gasps. Then the judge delivered the final verdict. All materials related to the improper conduct of Judge Whitfield will be forwarded to the Judicial Conduct Board and the district attorney. This hearing is adjourned. She stood and left without another word. The bailiff called for order, but the room dissolved into chaos anyway. Trish was screeching. Brittany burst into loud, dramatic tears. Gregory looked like he was going to vomit. Caldwell looked like he was calculating how to flee the state. Raymond put a hand on my shoulder, smiling. Couldn't have gone better, he said. Amara let out a shaky laugh. I can't believe it. We won. You didn't just win, Raymond said. You blew their entire scheme wide open. As we gathered our things, Gregory approached us cautiously, like a man approaching a lion in a cage. Mr. Palmer, he said, voice trembling. Perhaps we could discuss a settlement. I stepped toward him. No, I said. You tried to ruin our lives. You used your connections to harass us. And now that you've been caught, you want mercy. He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. We'll see you in civil court, I said. His shoulders collapsed, and his attorney pulled him away before he said anything that could make things worse. As Amara and I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Atlanta sunlight, she slipped her hand into mine. Let's go get my car, she said, smiling for the first time in weeks. And for the first time I knew this was only the beginning of the Harringtons' downfall. The impound lot called us less than an hour after we left the courthouse. Amara and I drove there in almost stunned silence, the adrenaline of the hearing still simmering under our skin. When we arrived, the attendant greeted us nervously, as if he already knew something big had gone down. Dr. Palmer, Mr. Palmer, he stammered. We got the release order. Your vehicle is ready. The lot supervisor personally escorted us to the car, apologizing the whole way. Apparently news of the judge's ruling had already reached the impound office. Nobody wanted to be associated with the mess now tied to Judge Whitfield's name. When Amara saw her Porsche, the glossy ballet slipper pink paint shining in the sunlight, freshly washed, as if the universe wanted to restore her pride, her expression softened. For the first time in weeks, she looked like herself again. She opened the driver's door, slowly ran her fingers across the leather stitching, then rested her forehead against the steering wheel. I stood beside the hood, not interrupting. After everything she'd endured, that moment belonged to her alone. When she finally looked up, her eyes glistened. Let's take her home. She revved the engine once, a proud, triumphant growl, and pulled out of the lot with a confidence that made my chest swell. We drove through Oak Ridge in a small, defiant parade. Curtains twitched. Neighbors peeked out their windows. A few even waved or gave thumbs up. Mrs. Chen was outside watering her hydrangeas. When she saw the car, she put down the hose, clapped dramatically, and yelled, "Justice served, beautiful car." Dr. Palmer Amara grinned and honked twice. But further down the street, in front of the Harrington mansion, stood a cluster of pink lawn chairs. Trish, Brittany, and Gregory were all sitting outside as if they were lying in wait. When our Porsche glided past, Brittany shot to her feet, jaw dropping in disbelief. "Why do they have it?" she shrieked. I swear I saw Trish yank Brittany back into her chair by the sleeve. Gregory, however, didn't move. He just stared at the car like a man watching his life unravel thread by thread. We ignored them. We parked the Porsche in the garage and closed the door with a sense of finality that felt almost ceremonial. But that wasn't the end. What happened next was the beginning of the Harringtons' collapse. 2 days after the hearing, Raymond filed our civil lawsuit, $1.2 million in damages for harassment, abuse of process, defamation, and tortious interference with both my business and Amara's career. To my surprise, the moment the lawsuit became public record, it blew up far beyond our neighborhood. Local news stations picked it up, then regional ones, then national. The headlines were brutal. Wealthy banker, family accused of targeting black couple over pink Porsche, judge under investigation for improper seizure, order surgeon and tech consultant fight back against HOA tyranny. Nothing, and I mean nothing, enrages people more than rich entitled bullies abusing power. Nobody likes corruption, and nobody likes people who think they own color rights to pink. Within 48 hours, a news van was parked at the entrance of Oak Ridge. Reporters interviewed neighbors. Most declined to speak. But not Mrs. Chen. That woman was born for the spotlight. They said black people shouldn't have nice cars, she told the reporter bluntly. I heard it with my own ears. Disgusting behavior. The clip went viral. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Amara's department head publicly reprimanded anyone who had anonymously complained about her. The administration issued a statement affirming their support for Dr. Amara Palmer, calling her an exemplary surgeon whose skills and compassion are unmatched. They didn't name names, but everyone knew who had tried to sabotage her. And then the financial dominoes began to fall. One morning I got a call from Marcus, a former client who now worked at a competing bank. Darius, he said, I can't tell you everything, but regulators have been sniffing around Gregory's firm for months. That doesn't surprise me, I muttered. This story of yours, he continued. It pushed things over the edge. Something about suspicious transfers and offshore accounts. I think he's in real trouble. How real? Marcus paused. You didn't hear this from me, but they're serving a warrant tomorrow. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. A warrant, like FBI level? Yep. Good luck, man, Marcus said before hanging up. The next morning, Oak Ridge woke up to 4 black SUVs parked outside the Harrington mansion. Agents in navy jackets filed inside. The street filled with residents pretending not to stare. Even joggers slowed to a crawl. Someone's golden retriever sat on the sidewalk like it didn't want to miss the show. Within 30 minutes, 2 boxes of documents and several electronic devices were carried out of the house. An hour later, Gregory Harrington was escorted into a government vehicle. The moment he turned around, defeated and sunken, I realized something. Gregory wasn't a mastermind. He was a man who'd been living on a tower of lies, and our fight for justice had simply knocked the first brick loose. The tower was falling now, and fast. That afternoon, their attorney contacted Raymond. We'd like to discuss settlement terms. Their tone had changed. Gone was the arrogance, the entitlement. Now it was desperation, panic. Raymond took control of the negotiation. He told them plainly, no gag order, no secrecy, no sweeping anything under the rug. The Harringtons initially offered $250,000. Raymond laughed. So did Amara. So did I. Eventually, they agreed to $750 0 inches damages, a public written apology printed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution mandatory community service for both Trish and Brittany at a diversity education center. Raymond even added one more requirement. They must explicitly acknowledge racial bias in their actions. The Harringtons' attorney tried to object. Raymond didn't budge. Within a week, the apology appeared in the Sunday paper. I still have a copy framed in my office, partly out of spite, partly out of pride. In the apology, the Harringtons admitted to deeply inappropriate, racially motivated behavior and acknowledged that they used influence and social connections improperly against the Palmers. Reading it for the first time was surreal. Amara teared up. Not from sadness, from closure. As for Brittany, rumor had it she withdrew from her private college after her father's assets were frozen. She started working part-time at a mall boutique, saving up for her own car. Not a Porsche, not pink, definitely not ours. Trish was seen less and less after the scandal. She avoided most neighbors, stopped attending HOA meetings, and eventually moved in with a relative after the mansion was put on the market. Gregory. He pled guilty to multiple counts of financial fraud and money laundering. 10 years in federal prison. Even months after everything ended, people in the neighborhood still whispered about the downfall of the pink tyrants. But for us, life didn't just go back to normal, it grew. With part of the settlement money, Amara and I launched a scholarship fund to support minority students pursuing STEM and medical careers. We helped more than 20 students in the first year alone. Meanwhile, my consulting business tripled because nothing builds trust like standing up to corruption and winning. One warm spring evening, Amara and I attended a neighborhood meeting where the main topic was amending the community code of conduct. The proposal included strict rules against harassment and discrimination. It passed unanimously. As we walked home under fading sunlight, Amara brushed her fingers over the Porsche's hood. "You know," she said softly, "I loved this car before." But now she smiled. "It means something." I nodded. "It's a symbol of justice," she asked. "Of us," I said. Standing up, fighting back, not letting anyone tell us what we deserve. She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. Then she whispered, "Let's take her for a drive." When she pulled out of the driveway, pink paint gleaming engine humming softly, it felt like the final page of a long, exhausting chapter, a reminder that we'd survived the storm, and that we'd turned the very thing Karen wanted to steal into a symbol of our victory. When the dust finally settled after the lawsuit, the investigation, the public apology, and the prison sentence, Amara and I found ourselves living in a version of Oak Ridge that felt lighter. The air wasn't thick with tension every time we stepped outside. No one glared at us from across the street. No one whispered into their phones when we drove past. For the first time in months, our neighborhood actually felt like a neighborhood again. But the aftermath was far from quiet. The media attention didn't disappear overnight. For weeks, reporters reached out asking for interviews. Some wanted the legal corruption angle. Others wanted the racial injustice angle. A few wanted to make it a cautionary tale about HOA abuse. We turned them all down. Not because we were afraid, but because we didn't want our lives defined by the Harringtons. We didn't want to become permanent characters in a story about someone else's entitlement and downfall. Still, the community's newfound awareness seemed to ripple outward. At the next HOA meeting, which Amara and I finally attended after years of avoiding them, the turnout was the biggest the neighborhood had ever seen. Easily 50 people crowded around the community center conference room, some sitting, most standing, a few even recording on their phones. The HOA president, Mr. Taylor, cleared his throat nervously as we walked in. "Dr. Palmer, Mr. Palmer. Glad you could make it," he said, shaking our hands with a visible tremble. "There's, something on the agenda today that affects you," a woman whispered loudly behind us. "It's about the harassment code." "They should have put that in years ago." Amara gently squeezed my arm. "Deep breaths," she said. "Let them talk." The meeting began with routine business yard maintenance complaints, someone's house paint being one shade too bright, the usual HOA nonsense. But halfway through, Taylor tapped his microphone. "Our main item today, the adoption of a new community conduct policy," he announced. Murmurs spread across the room. This policy, he continued, is being proposed in response to recent events that have deeply impacted our neighborhood. He didn't say the Harringtons' name, but every head turned toward their now empty chair at the table, the seat Trish once used like a throne. Taylor read aloud, "This community will not tolerate harassment, intimidation, discrimination, or misuse of authority, formal or informal, against any resident. Violations will result in immediate removal from all HOA committees and referral to appropriate legal authorities." When the vote opened, every hand in the room went up. Even the old man who always voted no on everything raised his hand without hesitation. Amara let out a breath she'd been holding for months. On our walk home, she said softly, "I never thought we'd become part of our neighborhood's change." "Me neither," I admitted. "Honestly, I just wanted to live in peace." "You still will," she said. "We will." And she was right. The neighborhood was quieter, more respectful. It was like Oak Ridge collectively realized it had let a monster grow in its garden, and now everyone wanted to tend the soil again. But despite the peace around us, something unexpected was happening inside us. We'd both changed. The fight had awakened something fierce and determined in both of us. We no longer moved through the world assuming things would just work out. We'd seen how power could warp fairness, how entitlement could metastasize, how lies could crawl their way into truth unless someone caught them in the act. It made us sharper, stronger, uncompromising when it mattered. And oddly enough, it made us want to give back. A few weeks after the settlement money cleared, Amara stood in our kitchen staring at a spreadsheet she'd been working on for days. "You know what I keep thinking about?" she asked. "What students who look like us, who come from where we did, who might give up because they don't see a path." She turned the laptop around. At the top of the screen was the header, "The Palmer Foundation for STEM and Medical Scholarships." I froze. "You're serious," I said. "I am," she replied. "I've wanted this since med school. And now Now we can finally afford to do it right. We called Raymond. We created a board. We filed for nonprofit status. Within 2 months, we had launched our first scholarship cycle. 20 students received funding that year, all from underrepresented backgrounds, all with dreams bigger than what their circumstances allowed. When the first scholarship winner, a shy girl named Aaliyah, sent us a thank you letter, Amara cried at the dining table again. But this time they were soft, joyful tears, the kind that felt like they carried hope instead of pain. Meanwhile, my own career took a strange but welcome turn. 2 companies reached out asking if I'd be willing to speak to their leadership about diversity, racial bias, and corporate responsibility. At first, I declined. I was a tech consultant, not a social activist. But then I thought about the hearing, the investigation, the months of harassment. The weight of fighting a system stacked against us. Maybe I did have something worth sharing. 1 speech turned into 3, 3 turned into 10. Before long, I developed an entire consulting branch dedicated to diversity and inclusion training. And companies, big ones, actually listened. Somewhere, in the chaos of the Harrington War, I had accidentally stumbled upon a calling I never knew I had. But while the world moved on, Oak Ridge still buzzed with whispers about the downfall of its once most powerful family. Moving trucks arrived at the Harrington mansion one morning, unceremoniously removing the last of their belongings. Mrs. Chen Ever, the informal neighborhood intelligence network, came walking down the sidewalk with her dog waving eagerly. "They're moving to a small condo," she reported almost gleefully. "Smaller than my laundry room," Amara raised an eyebrow. "Where did you hear that? You'd be surprised what people talk about at the salon." Mrs. Chen winked. We thanked her, but honestly, we didn't need the details. Sometimes justice speaks for itself. Months later, the Harrington mansion went up for sale. And in a poetic turn, the realtor's description didn't mention anything about prestige status or luxury, just motivated seller, accepting offers. And then one afternoon, as I was walking our dog, a red sedan pulled up beside me. The window rolled down. Brittany. Except she looked different, older, humbled. Hair in a plain ponytail. No pink, no designer clothes. Just a polo shirt and a name tag from a clothing store. "Mr. Palmer," she said quietly. I nodded. She swallowed hard. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry." I didn't respond immediately. I'd imagined this moment so many times, and none of those imagined versions ever included her sounding sincere. "I was raised wrong," she said, eyes glassy. I didn't understand anything about consequences or fairness. And my parents, well, I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see entitlement. I saw a kid who had been handed poison her whole life and finally realized she didn't have to keep drinking it. "You can be better than what you came from," I said quietly. She nodded. "I'm trying." Then she drove off. I stood in the driveway for a long time after that, processing how surreal life could be. That night, as Amara and I sat on the back patio under string lights, sipping wine, watching fireflies flicker in the yard, we reflected on everything we'd been through. "Do you ever think about how all this started?" she asked. "With a car," I chuckled. "Yeah, pretty ironic." "No," she smiled softly. "With love." She was right. The pink Porsche wasn't just a car. It wasn't a trophy. It wasn't a prize to be fought over. It was a symbol of everything we'd built together from nothing. A reminder that our love had survived every storm life threw at us. And now it was a symbol of something even bigger: justice, resilience, and the refusal to be bullied no matter who tries. Sometimes the thing someone tries to steal from you becomes the very thing that exposes their true nature. And sometimes the fight you never wanted becomes the one that shapes your future. As we sat there, the garage light flicked on, automatically illuminating the Porsche through the window, its pink paint reflecting softly like a quiet victory. Amara raised her glass. To surviving. I clinked mine against hers. To winning. And in that moment, everything felt right. Life has a way of testing you, especially when you least expect it. Sometimes the battles you face aren't the ones you started, but the ones you have to finish, because walking away would cost you more than standing your ground. The truth is, injustice doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. Entitlement doesn't shrink just because you avoid it. And corruption doesn't stop unless someone pushes back. What Amara and I learned is simple but powerful. You don't have to be loud, wealthy, or influential to fight for what's right. You just have to be persistent and unafraid to shine a light where others want darkness. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the steady voice saying, "Not today." If you've ever been in a situation where someone tried to take what was yours, your peace, your dignity, your rights, remember this story and remember that you're stronger than you think. Comment your thoughts below, share your own experiences, and make sure to subscribe for more HOA justice stories.